it's me. Today we are controlling the narrative. William the Conqueror, King of England from 1066 to 1087, died on September 9th, 1087, at his palace in Rouen, Normandy. He had reigned over England for more than 20 years, ever since he'd conquered it by defeating Harold Godwinson at the Battle of Hastings on October 14th. 1066, William was born in 1028 in Falaise, Normandy. He was the son of Robert the Magnificent, Duke of Normandy, and Heleva or Falea. His parents had an affair while his father was supposed to be on a pilgrimage to the shrine of St. James in Compostela, Spain. His father had actually gone there, but he'd gotten lost on the way back and ended up in Falaise, where he met Heleva. When Robert returned to Normandy, he had to put down a rebellion by one of his nobles, and he left Heleva behind with their young son. William and went off to fight the rebels. Robert was killed in a hunting accident, while William was still a teenager, so William inherited the Duchy of Normandy at age 20. He was crowned Duke in a ceremony at Rouen on July 3, 1043, where he did something that would become a famous royal pain-in-the-ass move. In addition to wearing the traditional robes and carrying the scepter and the sword of state, William also wore a crown. It wasn't like one of those paper crowns you can buy at Walmart. This was a real king's crown. The problem was that according to tradition, only the English monarch had the right to wear a crown in Westminster Abbey, but William was not the King of England yet. That wouldn't happen until December when he defeated Harold Godwinson and took the English crown for himself. But in 1043, he was just the Duke of Normandy and he had no business wearing a crown at his coronation in Rouen. However, he did it anyway, apparently because he was just that kind of guy. In 1051, he married Matilda of Flanders in a lavish ceremony at the Church of St. Peter in Normandy. They had 8 children together. During his reign as Duke, he worked hard to strengthen the duchy and expand his power, but he was constantly at war with the French king, Louis VI, over the border territories of Maine. He even went as far as invading France itself, but was defeated by Louis at the Battle of Mortimer in 1054. William decided he was tired of being a minor regional lord and wanted to rule over a kingdom instead. He invaded England, defeated King Harold Godwinson at the Battle of Hastings, and became the first Norman king of England. Under his rule, England was transformed. The language, culture, and customs of the country were changed to be more Norman French in style. William built castles all over England, including the Tower of London. He also introduced new agricultural techniques and promoted trade, but he was also a harsh and tyrannical ruler who was not above executing people on the slightest suspicion of He began planning for his eventual death and burial. Apparently he wanted to be buried next to William the Marshal, Duke of Normandy, and saintly King of Jerusalem, and he had a tomb constructed for himself in the Church of St. Thomas Becket in Canterbury. There were grand plans for his funeral, which would be held 3 days after his death. When he died on September 9, 1087, those plans went into action. His body was embalmed and laid out in state in the royal palace. A huge crowd gathered to pay their respects. Then on the 12th, the funeral procession set out for Canterbury. The coffin was carried on a golden bier by 8 strong oxen. It was covered in a rich pall and surmounted by a wooden cross. Behind the coffin walked William's son, William II, along with other nobles and clergy. They paraded through the streets of London, then crossed the Thames to Westminster, where they stopped for the night. The next morning, the coffin was brought to Westminster Abbey and placed on a raised platform. The funeral mass was held on the 14th, and the huge crowd that had followed the procession from London was so unruly that the monks of the abbey were afraid they would try to steal the coffin before it could be buried. To prevent this, they locked the doors of the abbey after the service and hid the key. Then the entire funeral procession got back in their wagons and headed north to Canterbury. They arrived on the 15th and carried the coffin to the Church of St. Thomas Becket, where it was finally lowered into the tomb. And then came the boom. It seems that someone hadn't properly sealed the coffin. Perhaps they had thought that the elaborate wooden cross on top of the coffin would keep people out, but that didn't stop whoever or whatever was inside from letting out a tremendous amount of air, which burst the coffin open and scattered the remains of the once great William the Conqueror across the floor of his tomb. Nobody knows whose remains they found in that tomb. And if you want to know why, please click here to watch another video.